So, hello everyone. We've got a really interesting guy here with a really interesting story to tell. No, don't be humble. Actually, I checked the valuation of Zendesk this morning, and it's above 5 billion euros now. That's almost $6 billion. And the interesting thing is, it all started about 12 years ago in Copenhagen.
Yep.
And from what I hear, a kitchen door played a really interesting role in that.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Yes. Just some numbers on the years. So last year we celebrated our 10-year anniversary from going live. So Zendesk has now been in production 10.5 years. Before that, we spent 1.5 years building the product in our spare time, in our vacations, in the weekends, in the evenings. And we had an office in my co-founder Alexander's apartment in his kitchen, where he had this wooden door on 2 sawhorses, and we sat around that in wooden chairs, and it was very painful. But basically, that was very hipster of the time, so that's how things worked out initially.
Until you now have a company that's worth like 5 billion euros. And you have strong ties to Germany. The first money you got for your company was actually from Berlin, right?
Yes, the first sort of serious business money was from a German VC, Christoph Jans, who is now founder of Point 9 Capital. He invested in Zendesk at a time where we couldn't find any money. Europe was very different back then, not least Denmark. No one really invested 12 years ago. So we were sort of out of luck trying to get money to increase our traction. And we ended up convincing a bunch of friends and family members to invest in the company, which today is fantastic for them. But if it hadn't worked out, terrible. And as part of that round, Christoph came in and was the first sort of structured person we got on board. You know, Christoph is really good with the business model and putting things into a spreadsheet and helping us showing sort of, okay, this is projected growth and how do you approach this?
Mm. Today we hear about friends and family rounds all the time, but how did it feel back then to actually ask your friends and your family for money, basically for a loan?
It's so, because it is an investment and not a loan, then you show them these papers and say, you got to sign this, and there's a high chance that you won't ever see this money again. Tough luck. But well knowing that if this indeed crashes, your friends and family are still going to get upset with you. And that's a big challenge, right? It's an emotional thing, so you carry that burden. This better succeed, right? Thankfully, at the time, there was a big housing boom, in Denmark at least, so people would borrow in their houses and their homes that had increased value and give us the money. So we closed that round just before the credit crunch and got lucky with that.
And you told me you really needed some money, right?
Yes, we had bootstrapped this. We went live October 2007 and didn't have any money. I had personally lost all my money in the housing crash. And we didn't have any funds to show, you know, so we had a credit line to get us through the first few months, but outside that, you know, we didn't really have any perspective.
A big part of the success of Zendesk, at least as the story goes, is moving the company to the US. Was that to get money, or were there also different reasons?
So the US is a special place, and we knew from very early on that if we got the chance, we would take it. The US has shown sort of what it could do for high-growth companies back in the dot-com days, so we knew there was something there that we should understand at least. And what really happened was a US investor flew to Denmark eventually and offered us a Series A round. And that sort of sealed the deal. So we were all committed before that happened, and we were lucky that it happened, and that allowed us to move to the US. There was no real discussion of, should we stay in Denmark, should we go, because there was nothing in Denmark.
Right, but do you think you could have grown the company to the scale it's at now if you stayed in Europe?
No. It's changing slightly, but what we need to understand is San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, has close to 100 years of innovation in technology companies. predating World War II. You know, the Stanford University started up a lot of companies around the university, and after the war, there's new inventions in transistors, and that created a big environment of tech companies that built all sorts of things that led to the microprocessor. And for each of these companies, you know, when a startup grows up, it becomes a big company. The first 1,000 people perhaps get unique insight into how to build a company. They jump out and create new companies or join new startups, and this ecosystem goes and goes and builds up experience. So in Silicon Valley, you can find people who have built a worldwide sales organization like 5 times in their career already. They've seen everything happen, succeed, and fail. You can't do that in Denmark. So it's like, if you want to build something for global scale, that's where you find the people. That's the people with the product development DNA, the insight into build sales and marketing for technology products. We don't have that in Denmark. I will say one thing that we do see currently, and I think this may be happening here as well already. We see second-time founders go out and build new companies and bring that experience from the first round in, and we already see this acceleration in their execution. So I'm hopeful that things are changing across Europe. It certainly looks like it.
Mm. But if you had to start your company today, would your first step again be to move across the pond?
No. I think we're really good in Europe to build products, technology products. I think we have a good combination of creativity and technology understanding. So I think it's a good place to start. I would probably stay here and try and raise a Series A eventually and use that to get proper product market fit. And then in time for Series B, have a plan for how to get into the US, how to execute there. I think you do need a presence in Silicon Valley eventually to build a proper network, to get access to the bigger VC firms that you'll need further down the journey should you be so lucky.
So in your opinion, it's still extremely difficult to get, I mean, I see the idea of moving there to be closer to the investors, but then we've seen US investors come to Europe, invest in Europe, or even open offices here in Europe. Do you think it's possible to get more US money into European startups?
I certainly can't rule that out. I just do know that once you're part of the network in Silicon Valley, it's a different game. You know, it's much easier to spread your reputation while you're there. I would definitely still keep product development in Europe because right now it's impossible to hire in the US. But I would have some business side in the US.
Okay. When you first came to the US as 3 young European guys, what were the difficulties that you ran into?
Yeah, I love Americans. I think they're very friendly people. You know, outside some people in Washington D.C. we shouldn't talk about, but they're very friendly and generous and kind. But they're also raised in a different way than we are in Europe. You know, they're very good at selling themselves. That's something they learn in school. You know, you get up in front of your classmates and present yourself, and you carry yourself. They're very charismatic. So the first guys I interviewed for jobs there were like, yeah, I've conquered the world 10 times. Oh my goodness, you know. Whereas I think Europeans, maybe especially Northern Europeans, are a little more sort of modest. You know, and people who are really, really super accomplished will not oversell themselves. So when they come in and talk to you, you're used to them being able to do at least what you talked about at the interview. In the US, it was a bit different. I got disappointed with the first few people, but we learned from that that this cultural difference is just something you need to incorporate into your interviewing process.
Do you think it was even a bit of an advantage that you got there and you could tell the story of 3 European guys that moved across the pond? Did that alone attract some attention from investors?
No, what really attracted the attention from the Series B investors, so we got a Series A when we were in Copenhagen. It was an investor who was looking to invest in an existing company in the portfolio, and then he was like, let me just see what else is out there. And he stumbled on us, and it gave us a Series A investment. Then we moved to the US with that Series A investment, used it all on lawyers, moved into the US. The moment we've moved to the US, gotten our visas, and moved our IP over, we had 4 Series B offers, which was pretty unheard of at the time because the credit crunch had taken all money away from the market. But the Series B investors heard about us through their existing investments. So they were asking, board meetings, whatever, what do you guys do for customer service? And they said, we use Zendesk. So it was this really sort of word of mouth between Silicon Valley companies that brought attention to us in the investment circle.
Is there a certain way that you need to approach US investors, particularly when you're not from the US?
Yeah. So I think in general, approaching investors is just hard. They're really good at not saying no. They're really good at sort of keeping you in the game, and you don't have the resources to keep grinding at that. I can't say one approach is better than the other. Be really successful. That's, yeah.
Now, looking back at the experiences you made in the US and in Europe, what would you say are the three most important pitfalls that young founders must not step into when they go to the US?
Three pitfalls. Well, there's a lot of advice out there. People just pull out their pocket and throw at you, like we're doing here. It's you can't really use that.
How about some actually useful advice?
It doesn't really exist. You have to be really aware of that. There are no shortcuts here. We're all on a journey, and we can't repeat it. We can listen to each other, and that's inspirational, and I think that's good. But use it as that.
Zendesk actually sort of came back to Denmark when I think it was your first international office as a company based in San Francisco that you opened. How did that feel coming back home to your home turf?
Yeah. So around 2010-11, we realized that we need to grow engineering quite a bit faster than we could in San Francisco. And the credit crunch had sort of disappeared off the radar, so there's money back in, and lots of new startups to compete with for good engineers. And Twitter, Facebook, Google pay like crazy salaries, so you compete with that as well. So we figured out we had to do something different. And that ended up being opening an engineering office in Copenhagen. So basically, we approached a local community of engineers and said, we're considering opening an office here. And that was in 2011. I flew over, interviewed like 8-9 guys, hired 5 of them, and we just had to see would this work out. And it did work out. I think today there are 60 in Copenhagen, but we have now 9 different locations around the world with engineering. So we use that experience to sort of figure out how do you scale up an engineering organization across multiple locations, and how do you grow and attract great people from all over the world.
Today, I think Zendesk has like 17 offices around the world.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as a global culture, or are the individual offices, rooted in the countries that they exist in?
I think it's a good mix. I think we have a great corporate culture that people really appreciate. Like, we're not trying to be your friend or serve you meals at nighttime or at lunch to keep you at your table. We have this healthy thing where, when you're off work, you're off work. We have good parental leave agreements across the world as well. So we have this as an overall, I think, a really good culture, and people like us to be. So we're Danish. We're a little weird and a little quirky, and I think people really like that. Then as an engineering organization, these different offices have each their own mission, their own product, their own vision, their ownership. We don't try to dictate, you should do things this way, because they're really smart people, and you don't treat really smart people that way. So instead, we give them ownership and say, locally, in Melbourne, you do things your way. This is the vision, this is where we want you to arrive at, but how you get there is more up to you. So give people ownership and autonomy creates a really great environment for creativity.
And since going to the US played such a large role in the development of the company, would you, if you look at the corporate culture, would you describe it as basically European with a US touch, or is it a US global whatever culture?
I like to think it's mostly European, to be honest, but heavily infused with the product development experience and execution from Silicon Valley. Many startups, people get pushed a lot, work crazy hours. We were never about that. Even early on, we told our employees to remember to go home. And when I did that, it's not that I didn't want them to work more or harder. It's more like I wanted to be able to call them in the middle of the night when shit hits the fan and not feel terrible about it. So it's you build a sustainable culture this way by treating people great, by allowing them to succeed, and treat them as human beings with families.
And how do you steer the culture in a particular direction? Is it by the people you choose, or is it by what you offer your employees, or how do you do that?
Culture is what you do. We can talk about it, but if you don't really do anything, nothing happens. So culture is how you present yourself and how you motivate people. A foosball table is nice and chips are nice, but that's not really it, right? It's bringing the camaraderie in and the joy and really not build up a top-down organization from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Morten. Are there any questions in the audience? Anything for Morten? If that is not the case, thank you, Morten, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. I hope you're having a good time. And thank you very much.
Thanks.